Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the McDonough School of Business here at Georgetown University. My name is Jeff Reed. I'm the founding director of the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Initiative. Here at Georgetown, we love entrepreneurs. We love celebrating entrepreneurs, inspiring our students to be entrepreneurial. And that's because entrepreneurs do such an amazing thing for the world. They're solving problems, creating value. And here today we have an amazing entrepreneur you're going to hear from soon. We'd like to thank our partners from the School of Foreign Service, Professors Scott Taylor and Steve Radlett. We thank you guys for being here and for helping put today's event together. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the Dean of the Business School, David Thomas, who has been here for 4 years and been an incredible supporter of global business as well as for entrepreneurship. Thank you very much. Let me welcome David Thomas.
Thank you all for coming today. Before I begin, I'd just like to reiterate Jeff's thanks to our colleagues from the School of Foreign Service, Professors Taylor and Radlett. It's great to partner on an event like the one that we're having here today. And I think there are so many ways in which having Mr. Elumelu here to talk about entrepreneurship and its global relevance is important to what we're trying to do here at the McDonough School of Business, where we strive every day to deliver a program that's focused around the development of principal leaders, creating and instilling in our students a global mindset toward the work of leading business and society, and instilling a sense of service as part of the obligation and identity with which our students go forth in the world to make a difference. And Mr. Elumelu's career has all of those themes: principal leadership, global orientation, and service to business and society. I think it's also important to recognize that entrepreneurs are changing the world. They're finding innovative solutions to problems large and small through business. From our alumnus, Jacques-Philippe Pervergy, who co-founded Empowered to create something as simple as a solar-powered LED lantern to lengthen the work and school day and improve safety where electricity is scarce to individuals, to individuals like Mr. Elumelu, who has used his experiences to develop the concept of Africapitalism to advance the development of an entire continent. Entrepreneurs are making a difference. Born and raised in Africa, Mr. Elumelu is an entrepreneur and philanthropist responsible for creating businesses across Africa in sectors critical to its economic development. And I learned yesterday from an email that I got from an alum that part of his agenda now for Africa is to develop a first-class business school with one of our alums, Bob Wheeler, as one of his partners in that effort. And I want to invite him to invite the Georgetown McDonough School of Business to be a partner in that effort if there's a way in which we can support it, because we believe, and I believe personally, that the development of Africa is critical to how the world will develop in the 21st century. So anything that we can do to make the operation of markets successful in creating both economic and social value on the continent of Africa, we stand prepared to support you. In 2012, he founded Heirs Holdings, an African investment holding company with investments in financial services, power generation, oil and gas, agribusiness, real estate, and hospitality. In the same year, he established the Tony Elumelu Foundation, an Africa-based and African-funded philanthropic organization dedicated to catalyzing entrepreneurship across Africa. Mr. Elumelu currently is chairman of Heirs Holding, as well as United Bank of Africa PLC and Transcorp PLC, Nigeria's largest listed conglomerate. In his early career, Mr. Elumelu turned the financially distressed Standard Trust Bank into a top 5 financial services player in Nigeria. In 2005, he led the largest merger in the banking sector in sub-Saharan Africa, combining Standard Trust and United Bank for Africa. Today, UBA operates in 19 African countries, as well as New York, London, and Paris. Mr. Elumelu presently is a member of the Global Advisory Board of the United Nations Sustainable Energy for All Initiative, USAID's Private Capital Group for Africa Partners Forum, and the Nigerian President's Agricultural Transformation Implementation Council. He also co-chairs the Aspen Institute Dialogue Series on Global Food Security, Vice Chairman of the National Competitiveness Council of Nigeria, and Chair of the Ministerial Committee to establish world-class hospitals and diagnostic centers across Nigeria. I read his resume, and I thought that to have accomplished all of this, he must be somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 or 80 years old. So when I saw him walk in looking like a kid, I said, "You're so much younger than I thought that you would be." It makes me feel like an underachiever. But we are pleased that he is able to join us today. Following his attendance at yesterday's White House Emerging Global Entrepreneurs event, where he was with President Barack Obama, I told him today that Barack was a little jealous that he was coming to Georgetown, so he decided to come himself today. In case you saw the parade that was over in front of Healy Hall earlier today. So he's chasing Mr. Elumelu here. So with that, I will turn it over to our distinguished guest, Mr. Elumelu.
Dean David Thomas of the Georgetown Business School, Jeff Reed, founder of the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Initiative, Professor Scott Taylor, director of the African Studies program at the School of Foreign Service, Steve Radlett, director of the Global Human Development program at the School of Foreign Service, students of the Georgetown School of Foreign Service and Business, my present here, the ambassador of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in the United States of America, His Excellency Ambassador Ade Adefuye, friends and community. Thank you all for being here today, the second of my 2 days in Washington, highlighting the importance of global entrepreneurship as a development model. Just yesterday, I was honored to participate as the only non-American speaker at a White House event on global entrepreneurship hosted by President Barack Obama, who is coincidentally speaking on your campus after this session this morning. He's not running after me. I'm the one tagging along. I want to thank President De Goa and the Schools of Foreign Service and Business for this invitation to speak with you about entrepreneurial-led development as a new model for Africa. I also want to thank 2 great and special ambassadors of this institution. One is a student, Ms. Uzomaka Ugochukwu. Are you here? Please come closer and stand for proper recognition. I want to thank Uzomaka for her initiative and efforts to make today's event happen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And the second is not a student, was a student of this institution, and that is my social assistant, Ms. Lola Obembe. Please stand up, please. She worked tirelessly with Ms. Uzamaka to align this program into my extremely busy schedule. And she is one of those who work with me that sacrifice and toil a lot from the background to make Tony Elumelu look like he's 75 years old, as he said. Additionally, I want to salute my friend, Dr. Rasha, the esteemed former head of the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, who just joined your fine institution, and under whose leadership the generosity and innovation of the American people has been expressed with great results and value for money. I accepted this invitation to speak to you because as the future foreign services officers and business leaders of America, your perspective on development will influence U.S. policy and investments in Africa. I am honored to speak in this prestigious institution, founded on Catholic principles including solidarity, care for the poor, dignity of work, and working for the common good. These principles can also be found at the heart of the international development agenda. So I'd like to share perspectives on development. I'll start by stating the obvious. There's no one here amongst us that questions whether development is desirable. No one questions the inherent need to save lives and help others by giving. However, I believe that we need to rethink the ways in which we help others. We need to give from the perspective of empowering the recipient instead of making them dependent on us. The reasons we pursue development, like a lot of things, are a matter of perspective. For instance, in recent years, the U.S. development community has argued that development is a security issue for the American state. That not only is it a moral ideal for Americans to promote prosperity, but also that Americans will not be safe in a world that is filled with economic disparity and the severe and disproportionate suffering of others. This perspective was adopted by the Obama administration, and development has now become elevated as one of the pillars of U.S. national security, alongside diplomacy and defense. From the African perspective, development is a matter of realizing our potential and making progress that we know is humanly possible because others have gotten there. It's a matter of dignity and self-reliance. It's a matter of creating opportunities that will empower individuals and communities. And of course, it means the beginning of the end of aid in Africa. Similarly, the practice of development is also a matter of perspective. So there's this purpose and perspective and the how. Traditionally, in Western societies, the concept of African development is linked to foreign aid. And we have seen various iterations of it, from the Cold War era, where billions of dollars were wasted with the aim of buying the loyalty of non-aligned countries, dependency-creating aid, and finally to the new model of delivering foreign assistance that is linked to targeted outcomes and measurable results. However, the various aid regimes have mostly retained the same principle, which is for donors to invest in the basic health and education of people in their access to food, to mention but a few, in the hopes that they and their countries will eventually make something of themselves. However, I also think that if we help people make something of themselves, by investing in jobs and economic opportunity. The beneficiaries will purchase health care, they will purchase education for their children, and look after their families. Even further, they will invest in healthcare and education startups to serve their communities. They will lift themselves out of poverty. Essentially, I'm saying that humanitarian assistance and economic opportunity are two sides of the same development coin. And we must not focus on one side of the coin at the expense of the other. And while I stand here today as an African grateful for the life-saving antiretrovirals that have saved so many of our people, the vaccines, the emergency food assistance, and the debt relief provided to my fellow African citizens, it is the economic opportunity side of the development coin that I believe will have more catalytic impact in development of Africa. And that is what I want to focus on today. Let's look at some empirical data. In 1990, the amount of overseas development assistance, ODA, received by Africa was $26 billion, and foreign direct investment, FDI, was only about $1 billion in 1990. Now, fast forward to 2013. In 2013, ODA received by Africa was $56 billion, and FDI was $57 billion. So while ODA has been growing and almost doubled since 1990, FDI, which was less than 5% of ODA in 1990, has grown so quickly that it has overtaken ODA. Now, ODA is easily and directly linked to development objectives. But unfortunately, not enough attention is paid to leveraging FDI to create economic opportunity, which is the other side of the coin. And this is critical because FDI will continue to rise as international capital travels further and further away to seek greater returns from other shores. The World Bank statistics tells us that Africa provides the greatest return on investment at this point in time. So Africa is moving towards becoming this engine of global economic growth. FDI aside, what African capital has been doing on the continent over the last decade has been simply stunning. For many African countries, the largest levels of FDI are now coming from Nigeria and South Africa, rather than from outside the continent. And there are a few examples of this increasing trend of Africans investing significant resources in their own countries and across the continent. Some of these examples include United Bank for Africa, which I chair, coincidentally. It employs 20,000 people and provides banking. It provides employment for 20,000 people and also provides banking and financial services to over 7 million Africans and businesses in 19 African countries, with a presence in Paris, London, and New York. The platform provided by UBA across Africa and the globe enables individuals to save and carry out seamless transactions across the world. UBA supports businesses to secure the capital they require to grow and drives intra-Africa trade and investment on scales previously unheard of. We have MTN, the South African telecommunications company, which has also grown to be a multi-billion-dollar company that operates in 17 African countries, as well as Europe and Asia, enabling hundreds of millions of individual Africans and their businesses to communicate with their families, customers, and markets. And of course, the Dangote Group. Dangote Cement is operating in 6 African countries and helping to build Africa, one brick at a time. And more companies like this across multiple sectors are featured in the soon-to-be-released book. The book is titled Africans Investing in Africa, a research partnership between my foundation, the Tony Elumelu Foundation, and the Oppenheimer Families Ventures Foundation. Companies such as these are creating hundreds of thousands of jobs in multiple countries and integrating the continent more each day. And in today's Africa, each job means a lot. Each job means the opportunity to pull a family permanently out of poverty. To create a wider tax revenue base for African governments. And very importantly, greater social stability because minds are constructively and gainfully engaged. So when we talk about the growth of the private sector in Africa, we are talking about the growth of infrastructure, housing, financial inclusion, and stability, to mention but a few. These all add up to increased development based on the other side of the development coin, which is economic opportunity. This is what I have been preaching, that the private sector has a role to play in Africa's development. This I call Africapitalism. Africapitalism means that we cannot leave the business of development up to our governments, donor countries, and philanthropic organizations. And African businesses usually come down to individuals. Behind most companies are an entrepreneur. I've enjoyed a lot of success in my chosen pursuits, but when it comes down to it, I see myself basically as an entrepreneur. And I recognize and embrace the responsibility that I have to play a role in Africa's development. I have come to understand that the most important thing I can do to advance our development is to help replicate my success in others and to evangelize the cause of entrepreneurship. I count myself among those who believe that 5 entrepreneurs built and transformed the United States of America into what it is today. Great people like John D. Rockefeller, Cornelius Vanderbilt, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, and of course, Henry Ford. Similarly, I believe we must recognize entrepreneurs as key drivers of development in Africa and prioritize them in African philosophy, philanthropy, and policy. If 5 men built this country in the manner that we know it today, then African private sector entrepreneurs have a role to play also. And here are some of the reasons why I think so. First, traditional development models are often top-down. Entrepreneurship is a bottom-up approach to economic growth and development. It focuses on empowering the individuals and not just the institutions. Second, at the micro level, entrepreneurship empowers the individual to decide how best to improve their own economic circumstances. At the macro level, it is the expression of African solutions to African economic problems. Third, as I wrote in an op-ed entitled A Marshall Plan for Africa's Employment Challenge, published in January 2014, 122 million Africans will enter the labor market by 2020. The number of new jobs that need to be created to accommodate this is a lot. Added to this are tens of millions of currently unemployed or underemployed people, making the human and economic consequences nearly too large to imagine if job creation is not seen as a priority across the continent. This demographic explosion can spell an economic boom or doom for the continent, depending on how we manage it. Governments and big corporates alone cannot provide employment for the millions of young Africans entering the job market every year. Supporting entrepreneurship means creating policies that improve the enabling environment for millions of potential job creators to succeed, rather than for a small number of government or private entities. Entrepreneurship means Africans no longer have to find a job or be trained to be employees. Instead, it will enable our young people to create their own jobs, become employers, and take charge of their futures instead of letting the future happen to them. And over the last 2 decades, here is what I've learned about African entrepreneurs. 1, many of them are already running homegrown businesses and have deep insights into local demand, consumer demand. They can spot unique gaps in the market for specific products and services. They can tap into strong networks and often exhibit a burning drive to create innovative, often disruptive solutions to rather complex challenges. These are the people who can fuel our future on the continent, but who lack the capital, the training, or the support to take their small businesses to national or regional scales. In Nigeria alone, and this plays out across the continent, 95% of startups fall in the first year, often due to reasons that can be resolved with the right policies. I have so much belief in the potential of nascent and budding African entrepreneurs. Last year, in The Economist magazine, I declared that 2015, which is this year, will be the year of the African entrepreneur. I backed up my belief on January 1, 2015, by committing $100 million to support the next generation of African entrepreneurs. The Tony Elumelu Entrepreneurship Program is designed to identify 1,000 African entrepreneurs every year for the next 10 years and provide them with the much-needed seed capital to actualize their business ideas. But it goes beyond that. We have already harnessed the talents of 400 mentors across the world, not just in Africa. In fact, yesterday at the White House, some man walked up to me and said, Mr. Elumelu, I'm one of the mentors for your program. We have recruited these mentors to support the first batch of 1,000 entrepreneurs who were chosen with the assistance of Accenture, the consulting firm, and a selection committee from a pool of over 20,000 applicants from across 54 African countries. They are currently receiving, as we speak at this moment, receiving online training and will attend a 2-day boot camp in Lagos in July to prepare them for the challenges of business and allow them to network with their peers across Africa. All they need to do, all they need to apply is just have a business idea and a commitment to succeed. The Tony Elumelu Entrepreneurship Program is an act of faith in our entrepreneurs to transform our continent, because it's not just about money. It's about vision. It's about values, plans, and community. And it's about development. I believe that by the end of this decade, the decade of entrepreneurship, thousands of businesses will grow and flourish and drive sustainable, that is the word, sustainable development across Africa. They will create ripples and waves of economic transformation across the continent. This is my mission. This is my vision. But I recognize that Tony Elumelu alone cannot make this happen. And the good news is I don't have to. I want to recognize and appreciate the role of political leaders such as President Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, for creating the enabling environment in Rwanda that allows businesses to succeed. I want to recognize President Barack Obama of the United States. And I want to also recognize established entrepreneurs and philanthropists like Jeff Skoll, Leo Media, and Richard Branson in supporting entrepreneurship as a development path for Africa and the world. I especially want to thank President Barack Obama for understanding that we have to encourage and support young people to become economic players in their countries. The Obama administration's Spark initiative that the Tony Elumelu Foundation is collaborating with is dedicated to promoting entrepreneurship all over the world as a key foreign policy priority. As I mentioned in my opening, just yesterday, President Obama hosted a White House event that brought together budding entrepreneurs and prominent leaders to help start the spark of entrepreneurship, leading up to a global entrepreneurship summit in Nairobi in July. I saw someone here before, Shadi. Is he here? I thought I saw Shadi. Stand up. Shadi is a young African entrepreneur from Nigeria who benefited from the Tony and Awele Education Prize. And for the first time in his life, he was in the same hall with the American president yesterday. Imagine what this would do to transform Shadi's life as it relates to entrepreneurship as a way to go. Shadi comes from the northern part of... Shadi is a Muslim for the northern part of Nigeria. And through his entrepreneurial commitment, a lot of young people are beginning to emulate his ways in northern Nigeria and beginning to see that through entrepreneurship, they can succeed. So we need to encourage Shadis of this world so we can have peace and prosperity. So there was a strong sense yesterday of fulfillment for me to be invited to the seat of your government to share and hear other perspectives on this profound topic and the power we are unleashing to develop our continent. In conclusion, the future we all want for ourselves is one of our own making, not happenstance. So, I want to finish by urging policymakers and the international development community to recognize and embrace entrepreneurship as a new model for the development of Africa and beyond. A model that empowers individual Africans and harnesses the power of innovation, personal initiative, hard work, and collective market-driven ingenuity to address previously intractable problems and change our continent forever. I have contributed $100 million to this cause and have made it my life's mission to empower Africa's entrepreneurs. I challenge all to consider what you can do to make the entrepreneur-led development model work for the benefit of every African. And to the students here today, I want to say that as you walk the halls of this prestigious university, as Lola once did, in the pursuit of your own path, confident in your ability to create the future that you imagine, you have to understand that Africa wants the same for themselves. Therefore, whatever course you choose to take in the services of others, be guided by the goal of unleashing the inherent potential that resides in each and every one of us. And finally, let me say congratulations to the graduating class of 2015. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those words and for being with us here today. I'm Steve Radelet. I'm a professor at the School of Foreign Service and direct the Global Human Development Program there. And wanted to have just a short conversation here and then we'll open up the microphones for some questions from the audience, so you can start thinking about your questions now. I wanted to start by stepping back and looking at sub-Saharan Africa as a whole and the economic renaissance that's been underway now for 15 or 20 years in not all of sub-Saharan Africa, but in many countries, in Ghana, in Mozambique, in Namibia, in Rwanda, as you mentioned, in Ethiopia, and it's starting in Nigeria, in South Africa to some extent. What happened? What changed 15 or 20 years ago that in those countries that have begun to turn around that has allowed this the beginning of an economic renaissance?
I think it's not just a few countries. A lot of African countries, in fact, we should be looking at the exception rather than the other.
Yeah, I think that's right.
A lot of African countries have improved significantly, and this is improved in so many ways. The macroeconomic environment in Africa has become a lot more stable. Government policies have become a lot more stable, that you can predict government. The regulatory environment in Africa is improving very fast, and political stability has now firmly been entrenched almost across all African countries. That where there's a coup, as there was one in Burkina Faso not a coup, anyway, government change of government, you see other African leaders put pressure. So there's like a peer mechanism that is now putting pressure on people to do what is right. And African leaders are now beginning to compete in terms of governance, and etc. So we've seen a new development in Africa. And as I said in my remarks, we had FDI defined before us, monies coming into Africa from outside Africa. But today, it's changed significantly. The bulk of FDI intra-Africa is coming from Africa. And this is because of those factors I gave, the economic factors, the political stability, but most importantly, the rise of the African entrepreneurs who have succeeded, who use, in the past, our leaders, private leaders were more government contractors. You see today, I have never done one contract in my life, and so many other African leaders are like that. So you begin to see people who are informed, who are exposed, and who expect the best for Africa. Because, and if you look at this school, I'm sure my assistant was from this school, and we have many other students here. A couple of them go back to Africa. And when they go back, they also demand and expect nothing but what they are used to. So a couple of factors have gone in. But in summary, I would say that the economic environment has become very stable. Government policies have become very predictable. You know, people don't care about certain things, but you know what? Let's know there's predictability. I would say that there are a few issues we still need to deal with in Africa. We need to make sure that corruption is brought down to the barest minimum, so that good governance, so people will do, masses will benefit. We also need to make sure that the issue of employment, you know, we'll tackle employment significantly. And for me, one of the ways of dealing with this is the issue of entrepreneurship. And for entrepreneurs to do well, we need to make sure that the enabling environment that will predispose, that would enable people with great ideas to succeed, that will have them. It's good to have access to capital, but we've seen that access to capital is not everything you need to succeed. We need to create the ecosystem that supports entrepreneurship. So those are things, areas we need to improve. And that is why we need to commend African leaders who are leading in that area so that others can emulate. And also that is why the entire world, the global community, the entire world, the development world, the leading democracies of the world should, in our respective engagement with Africa, continue to impress on everyone to make sure that the right environment is created to unleash the potential we have in our people.
Good. You mentioned political stability several times, and it makes me think of the recent elections in Nigeria, because part of stability is to have change that happens constitutionally, smoothly, and we had these recent elections in Nigeria where an opposition party won and there was a peaceful, smooth transfer of power. Hard to imagine 20 years ago or 10 years ago that this could have happened. Talk a little bit about the importance of the recent elections in Nigeria.
It's quite symbolic and significant in many respects. First is it tells the world that the narrative on Africa should change from what it used to be, the stereotype, the way the world used to perceive Africa. This is a new Africa in the 21st century, where you have leaders who are beginning to behave in a different way. So we need the world to see this. For me, it's not just success for Nigeria as a country, but success to every black person, and even to the whole world, that we are advancing. There's the thing about the commonality of humanity, that all of us are doing well and making progress in the right direction. So that's one, the narrative. So people need to begin to see things differently. Second one is it tells you about what the first question you asked, the level of advancement in the political process, which leads to the right governance. And when you have good governance, the business entrepreneurs do well. It tells you that things have changed significantly. Not only did the opposition won from an incumbent leader who was also, and the margin was 2 million votes. You'd have expected a lot of things and maybe court cases, etc., but there was a peaceful acceptance of defeat. He set the tone. He set the tone. You now see state governors also, the secondary level of government, people losing at that level. Instead of going to court, they also coordinating. Right. So you see good things happening. I think that if you continue like this, you will see more professionals come into that space, and that will make governance improve. So we're moving in the right direction.
Good. You mentioned Shadi, and I think the future of not just Nigeria, but much of sub-Saharan Africa lies with people like Shadi. What can be done what more can be done to support young entrepreneurs, both in terms of what you're doing, you've already mentioned, but what can governments do, what can aid agencies do to help support young entrepreneurs that really are the future of so many countries in Africa?
A couple of things. Personally, I believe in the inherent ingenuity of the individual. And implicit in that, is we need to see how we can unleash, engage, and support individuals. So what we have done, are doing through the Tony Elumelu Foundation, is, in my viewpoint, a classical demonstration of what we owe to our continent and to humanity. Just so that we are not the only ones who are succeeding. And by the way, success to one person in a land of a midst of poverty is a threat to even that person. So it's in our best interest that we create a commonwealth as much as possible, create a kind of environment that everyone is happy. But the degree could be different, but the basic needs of human life should be there. Also, I think that the development world, we need to, this mentality of and focus on saving lives than empowering people. We need to look at it again. If we look at, I come from Africa, and as I said in my remarks, we appreciate what has happened and so far, but let's rethink how we engage, so we can engage in a manner that creates self-sufficiency, self-dependence system, rather than perpetual expectation of handouts, etc., from people. So we need to do that. And thirdly, our government needs to make sure we create the right environment that will enable people to succeed. Okay, so I believe we do a combination of all of this, and also first realize in our subconscious that there's so much the individual can do, and then they can help. It can be a starting point.
Good. Let me turn to questions from the audience. We've got people lined up at the microphones already. Please introduce yourself briefly and ask a brief question. No speeches, but ask a brief question, and we'll go through as many of these questions as we can in the time that we've got remaining. Please, we'll start on my left.
Hi. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Courtney Maduke. I'm a sophomore, rising junior now in the School of Foreign Service. So my question goes to, I guess, the gender gap and gender disparity in regards to entrepreneurship. And I would like to hear what you have to say about the role of women in entrepreneurship and how difficult it is for them to become entrepreneurs, because there's a huge gap with women in entrepreneurship as well as in the labor market in general in a lot of countries in sub-Saharan Africa.
Good question.
Can I think, thanks for the question. So when in January this year, January 1, when we launched the Tony Elumelu entrepreneurship program I talked about, we decided to open it up to all Africans. And it was open the application was open for 4 weeks. Second week, we realized that the number, because we're monitoring the applications on a daily basis, we realized that we made 2 findings. One is that we didn't have enough people from North Africa applying. And so we created awareness deliberately in that zone to encourage them. And we're happy that we chose it. 1,000 people we selected are from across 55 African countries. Second interesting finding, which speaks to what your question, is that not many women were applying. So I have over 120 followers on social media and Twitter, and I have so many other friends and associates. By the way, if you tweet today on this, you can tweet at #tip. So I have all of this. So what we did was to mobilize people, and we created more awareness. Women, African women, where are you? Apply for TIP. And so we saw a lot. So the learning point, and also as we selected, it was gender agnostic to a large extent, but we had 800 people who were chosen on merit. Then we had 200 people that the selection committee member had the prerogative to decide how to adjust there. So I think we females got a lot more attention at that level. But critical finding for me, learning going forward, which I'd like to share with the world, is, especially for African women at this point in time, we should deliberately encourage them. If we did not deliberately encourage women, maybe we would not have gotten the number. I think we got almost 30 or more than 30% of the 1,000 people today that on the TIP program, the Tony Elumelu Entrepreneurship Program, are women. But if we did not deliberately go out, we might not have achieved this. So it should be a conscious effort, conscious movement. But the women fold also, you need to encourage yourselves too. Let's encourage people, because you are who you think and what you think you are. Let's break that glass ceiling. There's opportunity, let's go for it. But we have seen that the greatest entrepreneurs of our time are women. My mother she's not so active again, an entrepreneur. And whatever I am today, my entrepreneurial calling, I took it from her. And so that is inherent in every woman. So we need to encourage women to succeed.
Good. We'll move over here. I can see already we're not going to be able to get through all of the questions. We've got long lines here, but we'll go through several more in the time that we have remaining. But over here on our right, please.
Good morning. Thank you, sir, for your great insights and great leadership. We're really tremendous, and we very much appreciate it. I'm Shelley Porgas. I'm the former head of the Global Entrepreneurship Program at the U.S. State Department, and was the person who helped the State Department launch the African Women's Entrepreneurship Program. So I'm also an entrepreneur in residence, by the way, here at Georgetown University, thanks to Jeff Reed and Alyssa Lovegrove. But my question, the young lady sort of anticipated my question, so let me just build on it. You've already commented on the challenges and the focus that you have on women entrepreneurs. Beyond that, you run one of Africa's largest banks, UBA, and I'm wondering, as someone who's on the board of the Global Banking Alliance for Women, what more the bank can be doing to reach out to those women, to support them both in the capacity building, which you're doing through your foundation, but also with the technical capacity and the financial literacy that your bank could be also serving them?
I think a couple of things we need to do. I think the issue of entrepreneurship can be addressed in two main broad buckets. First is what needs to be done at policy level to create the right environment. And the second one is what should be done in that space of entrepreneurship ecosystem to make it work. So on the second bucket, there's issue of access to capital, especially seed capital, long-term patient capital. But equally important is mentorship. Mm-hmm. And also networking opportunities. So like a Shadi yesterday at the White House, interacting with others from across the world. It's significant. Mm-hmm. It has a telling impact, if not today, in future, in how he approaches issues. And he has an ecosystem of people we can talk to, network of people we can talk to rub ideas. Mm-hmm. For ladies, I want to also look at it from two perspectives. They need access to long-term cheap capital that is patient. We all should work together to make this happen. This is why I call on everyone. Development community is good to save lives. But let's see if we can commit 75% in saving lives, 25% to providing long-term capital. Mm-hmm. I think my founder could have given scholarships, water, etc., with $100 million and be more popular because the community sees this. But sustainable eradication of poverty, dealing with the issue of sustainable development in Africa in the 21st century requires more than that. It requires economic opportunity approach. And so women need this. So we need to support them, capital, mentoring. On the board of UBA, we have about 4 or 5 female directors, both executive directors and non-executive directors. One of the reasons we did this was to deliberately encourage them to also mentor the younger ones. So we need to also see successful women help us mentor upcoming ladies. Mentor them on how to succeed in business, how to handle the work-life balance issues. Female entrepreneurs, what challenge they go to, does it have impact on their families, etc. So all of them, because there are a lot of, some women will just give up because they can't cope with some of these seemingly mundane but important issues. So we need all together to make this happen.
So I'd like to extend an invitation to UBA to join the Global Banking Alliance for Women. Our focus is on Africa this year. And we would welcome you and share with you the best practices we have on creating very profitable programs for the bank and for the women. Thank you.
Fantastic. Charles, take note.
Thank you. Thank you. Jason.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elumelu. Thank you very much, Mr. Elumelu, for an interesting conversation about such an exciting and important topic. My name is Jason Noah. I'm a student, or about to be graduate of the Global Human Development Program under Professor Radelet's leadership.
He's wearing his best business suit today, too.
I can see.
Got really dressed up today, I apologize. So my question, though, people define entrepreneurship in many different ways, and people identify as an entrepreneur for different reasons. And so I'm curious to hear how you define entrepreneurship, and also what does success as an entrepreneur mean in the context of Africa? Is it just building a sustainable business model? Is it providing a certain number of jobs? Is it entering the formal market? Is it building so you can have a successful exit? I'm curious to hear how you define success and entrepreneurship as a whole.
I think you've helped me answer the question. So let me not say it is the genius of and not the tyranny of all. So they all go together in defining entrepreneurship. But first is, and how to measure success. So first is, for me, entrepreneurship is about the individual. Not so much the institution, but the individual. Then the individual, the best form of power is when you democratize power and give Steve Jobs did it in the phone we all use. He gave us device to make life easy for us. So we should engage more people, bring them to the space. Let's create more entrepreneurs, starting with the individuals, and let the individuals grow. And so that transition from running a one-man business to a global business is key. And you can define that also as a success point. That when you transit from this to this, then it means maybe from a one-man business to an iconic institution, before a regional institution, and before a global institution. 2, you can also look at entrepreneurship from a point of view. So in the context of today's conversation, entrepreneurship to a large extent, to me, success can be narrowly defined as ability to create more jobs on the African continent. And so if you have an entrepreneur that has grown from 1 or 2 people to 100 people, I can say that is success. So it depends on how we define entrepreneur, but they all tie together. You need an entrepreneur to succeed. 95% of businesses in Nigeria and across Africa fail in the first year. So that's failure. But we want to make sure that they succeed and that they grow to become iconic national institutions, regional players, global players, and go. So that can be a way also that you are not part of 95, that if you succeed, it's success in the entrepreneurship. Then it can also be ability to create an exit mechanism, an exit option for investors. Angel capital investors in businesses, we want to make sure that there's sustainability in every approach we adopt. So that as you put money to a business A should grow and create an exit option for you so that you can put that money to other businesses also. So that also is a way of defining, can be a way of defining success. Success can also be defined in context of ability to make returns, to make dividends to investors. Because that on its own can perpetuate greater success, not just for you, but for other people. Say, well, we invested in this business, succeeded, so let's invest in these other ones. So it's a whole lot. Everything you define, for what I've some that you didn't talk about, I've talked about here, all speak to success in entrepreneurship.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for just 2 more questions, unfortunately. Our time is winding down, and then
I'll take 3 or 4, then I make my answer short.
And then I want to turn to Professor Scott Taylor to close our session here in a few minutes. So we've got time for 1 of each. I apologize to everyone else. We could obviously be here all afternoon, but we've got 1 question here and then 1 on the other side, and then we'll wrap up. Please go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Elumelu. I'm Valerie DaCosta. I'm from the InfoDev program at the World Bank. We've collaborated with your foundation for several years.
Can you speak up, please?
I'm from InfoDev at the World Bank. We've collaborated with the foundation, with your foundation for several years, and we appreciate your work. I think that your announcement has been very inspirational and very aspirational as well, and that's what folks like Shadi do. For every Shadi, there are lots of failures. And I wonder if, as part of your narrative and as part of your message today as well, you could talk a lot, or a lot more perhaps, about the times you've had to be resilient and get back up, the number of times businesses in your first cohort may fail and need to pivot. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that if you have some time.
So yesterday at the White House, I was asked a question: what's the partnership? What advice do I have for entrepreneurs? And I said, and so that will speak to this since we don't have more time. I said, entrepreneurship is a long-term game. It's a marathon game. It's not a short-term game. And so, in the economy, time series of short terms create a long term. So in the short term, you might have, it's normal. Business is not linear. You have up and down. People make mistakes, fail. But critical things: 1, know that it's a long-term game. 2, learn from your mistakes. 3, be resilient. And 4, long-term again. Keep the long-term perspective and you succeed. Tony Elumelu, Steve Jobs. We know the case of Steve Jobs. Out, back in. Tony Elumelu. All of us, we make mistakes. But we cannot be deterred because we made mistakes. And that's where resilience is key, and that's where long-term perspective is key.
Last question, and then we'll turn to Professor Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. An entrepreneur behind me was just selected for your program and wants to say thank you, Emeka Ebu. But my question is, given that the rise of industry and the growth of capitalism takes jobs away from agriculture, how does Africapitalism look at agriculture as a tool for growth in Africa, given that most jobs in sub-Saharan Africa are in the agricultural sector? And so what is the intersection between Africapitalism and agriculture?
I hope we're defining capitalism in the 21st century in an all-embracing fashion, and that we're not looking at those ages of the industrial revolution, the Greek revolution. Today is they're all together. So I tell you our experience with the Tony Elumelu Entrepreneur Program when we advertised 20,000 people applied. And I think, Weber, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we had the highest applicants from agriculture in Africa. What percentage was it? I think more than of the 20,000 people who applied, more than 30%, but I think there's a lot more applied. In fact, it was an interesting revelation. Agriculture first. I think education was 2. Technology, in fact, technology education, these 3 were almost 60 or 70% of total application we got. So the agriculture is extremely integral to prosperity, to poverty alleviation, to job creation. And so if capitalism or Africapitalism define the context of economic prosperity and social wealth, then it means that job creation is an integral part of social wealth. And agriculture is key in making that happen. So we need to look at some of the philosophers, some of the definitions of what we had before. To me, Africapitalism is the interplay, the private sector's commitment and involvement in developing Africa through making long-term investments in sectors that help to create economic wealth and prosperity and social wealth. Agri is central for this. Thank you.
Let me now turn to Professor Scott Taylor to wrap things up. I apologize to the rest of you that are waiting in line, but we just don't have time to go through all of the questions. So, Professor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you all. I was joking before we started. President Obama gives the State of the Union address, and then after the State of the Union, there's always a Republican response. Nobody remembers the Republican response. So I've been placed in the unenviable position of trying to follow as inspiring a leader and a guest as we could have, Tony Elumelu. But I promise to be brief. First, I just want to reiterate the thanks for our co-sponsors in the Office of the President, Dean Thomas, and the McDonough School of Business, the Entrepreneurship Initiative, of course, Professor Radelet and the Global Human Development Program, and my colleagues in the African Studies Program. But most of all, I want to thank Mr. Elumelu for being here and his staff for making that possible. As we adjourn, I want us to consider and reflect on really the revolution that we're witnessing in African business, capitalism, and development. And we've just been privileged to hear from one of the foremost leaders of that revolution, one of Africa's outstanding, and the world's outstanding business leaders and philanthropists. Tony Elumelu is a founding member of that new generation of Africapitalist actors, business people who are leading the way in areas of development, employment creation, and ultimately poverty eradication. And I think that's much of what lies at the heart of what we were talking about today, and coincidentally, lies at the heart of another discussion taking place right now by another global leader a few hundred yards from here. Indeed, the 1990s notion that Mr. Elumelu mentioned of African solutions to African problems, I always found, at least in the early time it was created sometime in the 1990s, as a hollow buzz phrase. but it's now a reality in these ideas and practices of Africapitalism, in the ideas and advances of business in Africa, all of which see leaders like Mr. Elumelu in its vanguard. Tony Elumelu, of course, will continue to directly support entrepreneurial development through the foundation and through his other important initiatives in education and, of course, in business, as he spoke about. But equally important, in my view, he will continue to serve as a role model for both aspiring and established entrepreneurs across Africa and across the globe, and I think that's one of the most important contributions. So we are indeed fortunate to have a guest of such wonderful experience and caliber and thoughtfulness with us here at Georgetown University. Thank you again, Mr. Elumelu, for being with us this morning. It is an honor to have you here, and thank you all so much for coming.